Welcome, everyone. It is always a pleasure to have you joining me and my guest, when I do have one, on the podcast. Today, I have a very special person. I know this young lady before she became a woman. I know her from a little girl, and I am so honored today to have with me as my guest, Jennifer Clark Miller. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you, Bishop.
Okay, well, let's get right into it. Let me give you a little bit about Jennifer. And she is, by the way, the daughter of Chief Clark and Sylvia Clark. You know, Chief Clark was a minister here. He's still a minister. He still considered himself having his own chair in the front, and nobody can sit in there.
Yes.
But a very great friend, big heart. Her parents, incredible people, and you can tell because they've given birth to an incredible woman. She's an entrepreneur, executive director, and a business owner of JSM Diversity. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. She's married. She'll probably tell us later for how many years. And children, how many children. We'll talk a little bit about that later. So, Jennifer, all right, before we go into who you are now, you're successful, you've done a lot. I want you to walk my audience through the Jennifer in her young adult life, before you got married. What were some of the challenges you went through as a young lady that perhaps nobody knew about? Nobody knew you were struggling with those issues and so forth. What were they like? What was the issues like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Before I even answer that, thank you, Bishop, for having me on today. It is a pleasure. As you said, I've known you for a long time and been inspired by you, and still I am very much. And definitely we'll talk about my family and where I am today. But looking back on, how I got here in this place that you call success, that sometimes feels like chaos to me, I definitely say that some of the struggles that I had as a young woman would have been just identity crisis, not really being sure about who I needed to be versus who other people thought that I needed to be. I think leadership was something that was always in the cards for me, but in our community, especially as Black women and then Afro-Caribbean women, my parents and my grandparents are Bahamian descendants. When you have this mentoring relationship, I think as a kid, for me and as a teenager, there just was a lot left out. I think that parents sometimes think that they're protecting their kids when they don't give them the unadulterated truth about how hard things can be at times and what that balance looks like, and how you get to an age where you're not sure about things, even having guidance on finances and having guidance on relationships. And we're often told all the no's and what not to do, but not told what to do. Mm-hmm. And so I think that those are some of the things that were struggles for me growing up in South Florida. I remember at one point around 15 or 16 years old, I was just living two completely different lives. There was one life I lived in school, and then there was another life that I lived at church. Mm-hmm. And when I got about 16, just before my 16th birthday, those two worlds completely collided, and I could no longer be two people, and I felt very stuck. Mm-hmm. I think what was very helpful for me at that time was actually a product of the Faith Center's programs that they had for youth. There was a youth pastor at the time who just really spent time with me. And that's something that I talk about a lot as a consultant. The issues that we experience in the world today are not new issues. I just think that people are unwilling to invest as much time as they used to be. And so I had someone who was willing to walk with me through my confusion and walk with me through becoming the person that I needed to be, both in school and in the world, and also that person that God was maturing me to be as a young woman. And that helped a lot.
Was there ever a time you felt like, there was no real hope for you? You were a person without a destination, didn't know where you were going, what your life was going to be like. You were just living, existing. Have it felt that way?
Yeah, I think it definitely felt that way maturing into adulthood, especially when people were deciding what schools they wanted to go to and what they wanted to do with their lives and what jobs and careers they wanted to have. And I had all of these different skill sets and different gifts, but I just wasn't sure what to do with them.
How frustrating was that?
It was very frustrating. I think the most frustrating part about that is that there was this expectation that I did know what I was doing, and this expectation that I had confidence and I didn't need help. And I'm part to blame for that, because, you know, when you're young, you just want to give this idea that you've got it under control. Right. And I didn't have it under control. And so there were definitely moments where I was unsure about what a future would look like. I could not see JSM diversity in the future. I couldn't see the places that I've lived and the things that I've done. I just couldn't see that.
Right. And so now that you transition into this JSM diversity company, I'll talk a little bit about that. But as a way of segueing into that, was there a time, it sounds as if you had the passion to do consulting, to be that leader, right? But you didn't quite sure how or whatever. What was the kick that gave you the nudge to say, girl, you better do it?
I think that I always had the gift of leadership. I wouldn't necessarily say that I knew how to use it. Sometimes I used it in the wrong ways and to influence the wrong things. But I think the nudge for me at the time that I decided to really step into that role was that no one else was doing it. And I wasn't afraid. And I didn't have a hesitation about me. I wasn't timid to do things. I think what kept me away from leadership was I didn't want to be responsible for anybody but myself. And I knew that if I became a leader, that would mean that people would look at me and they would look to me. And I didn't want that. I knew the weight of responsibility because I had family and ministry and I had family and leadership roles. And I knew what that demand was like. And I think it just came to a point where I had to decide to either sit with the solutions that I had in my mind to solve problems or step out into the unknown and say, I'm going to take this risk and put myself out there and see what happens.
Do you feel young girls, and again, you know, girls in their adulthood life, if you will, 30s or whatever, do you feel that, you know, they are visionaries, they want to succeed? But you talked once about this empty space. Do you think that women go through this period of the empty space of insecurity, anxiety, a shame of their past, you know, things that they have done, you know, and the lifestyle that they might have lived at one point, or not having a father, or, you know, whatever the issues are? Do you think that women find themselves in that empty space, struggling with those things, and that's preventing them from saying, let me take the leap of faith and do what God has told me to do? Absolutely.
I've heard it once called the curse of comparison. I just think that there's so much looking around at what other people are doing and, you know, seeing people, what appears, it looks like success. You're looking at someone's highlight reel from social media and you're seeing all these different high moments, and you're looking at your own life and comparing that and not seeing as many high moments in your own life. And I think that adds to that empty space. But I do also believe that there are a lot of creative, brilliant, wonderful ideas that are being born with my generation and the generation that's behind us. I've never seen so many entrepreneurs and so many people who are able to solve problems with things that are internal, the gifts that they possess. So yeah, I absolutely would say that there is empty space, and there's times that you may feel discouraged and you may feel like, man, I'm not where I want to be at 35 or at 41 or whatever age. But most of that comes from looking at other people, and less of that is coming from you looking at your own path and how successful you've been at what you've done.
And I want those of you who are watching and listening to Jennifer and I talking about, pursuing your passions. Here's a young lady who I know personal, I know Jennifer. I know her parents. I know Jennifer when she was a little girl before she became this woman today. And I can tell you that what I'm hearing from her is simply this, don't compare yourself with others, know who you are. And it's normal. It's okay to feel at times, inadequate, that you may not have it all together. It's okay to feel like everything is falling apart. And sometimes things that are falling apart is actually coming together. It's working for your good. So as you're listening to our discussion, I want you to really make your comments and, respond. If you like what she's saying, if it's ministering to you, please let me know. So you solved a problem, Jennifer, with JSM diversity. What is JSM diversity and what's the problem it is solving or problem?
Oh, Bishop, I wish that I had solved that problem, but the problems that JSM diversity addresses, they're ongoing and they'll probably be here long after I'm gone. But what we do at JSM diversity is we create safe spaces for dialogue about equity and inclusion. And so what that looks like is putting on workshops. We talk to businesses, nonprofit organizations about their diversity goals, and then we assess that company by giving them surveys and doing focus group interviews to see where they are versus where they think they are. Because a lot of companies think that they're diverse and organizations think that they're welcoming to other cultures. But through our assessment, we find out what are the target areas that they're missing and what they need to do as an organization in order to close that gap and to meet those goals. And once we've done that, we provide them with an analysis report of that and some recommendations along with workshops and trainings. But I think the most important part of what we've done in the past year, we've been busier in 2020 than we ever have been. And that is teaching adults and business owners how to have contentious conversations, very conflicting conversation about race, about sexual orientation, about gender, how to get a dialogue started about faith, all of those kinds of things that we typically don't talk about. And so when they're brought to the surface at work or in our organization, it's hard for people to figure out how to have a polite and respectful dialogue. And so we provide them with the resources and the tools and the language to do that.
All right. So my listeners and viewers who are watching the video of this, all right, I think all of us have experienced racism at some level, whether a person is Caucasian, they might have witnessed racism against another race, or they themselves might have experienced it. And of course, Blacks and, Latinos, and so forth. Let's deal with the issue of racism for a moment. You talked about equity. We live in a country, as you know, that was birthed out of suppression at the end of the day, where it's a group of people who felt that it was okay to take and own something that didn't belong to them in the first place. That's the history of our country. We understand that. And then Blacks were brought in to build the country up as slaves and so forth. How do you, Jennifer, especially even in the school system, you got a teenage daughter or a teenage girl, you've got a child in, junior school or whatever. How do you start the conversation about racism? It's a big elephant in the room, and not get a backlash. How do you do it?
I would say that the first thing that we have to do before we, as people who have been tremendously impacted by racism, have a conversation about racism, we have to evaluate our bandwidth, right? So we need to know whether or not we have the right headspace to have a respectful dialogue about race. So I would say if you just got through watching Roots or that's not going to be a good time to have a conversation with someone about racism, right? You're not in the right headspace. You don't have the bandwidth to have that kind of conversation at that time. So I think that what happens is we rush into these conversations thinking that we're emotionally and relationally equipped to have them, and we are not. So we've over-evaluated our relational equity, and we think, oh, I can do this. And then someone touches a sore spot and it becomes an emotional ball of chaos. And that's not progressive. So I think that that's the first step into having a conversation about race or any of those subjects that have to do with equity and inclusion. You need to know if you're in the right headspace, and then know if you have the right tools and the right language to have that kind of dialogue.
Wow. Headspace. Let's stay there for a moment. When is the safest time to then at least bring it up? Because right now in the country, as you know, from the whole issue of the virus and how it has been politicized, right? That's one thing. And then you've got racism that has always plagued our country. It has plagued the workplace, our educational system, our private sector, the business sector, and so forth. Let's say, okay, fine, you didn't watch the movie Roots. Okay, fine. But an employer, may have, let's say, two Black person with a predominantly white, a works environment. We know racism is there and so forth. How, based on your level of expertise, this is what you do, because listeners are watching right now and they've got kids who come home and say to them, this one say this to me, or they themselves at a workplace where they know they've been discriminated. They know they're going through these issues. When is the right time in that headspace period to really kind of like, okay, I need to say something?
So that's a great question. And it is a question that we get asked often because people want to have the conversation. They want to have it the right way, but like, when is the right time? And I think that once you've identified your bandwidth and you know where you are in terms of like, if you're capable of having that kind of dialogue, if you're equipped to have that dialogue, the second thing that we encourage businesses and our workshops to do is to evaluate the conversation. You need to know whether or not the conversation is personal or personable. And basically that translates into how much does this conversation really mean to you? So a personable conversation is a conversation where I'm going to be polite. I'm going to use you and they, but I'll never use I because it's detached from emotion. This is a professional setting. We're in the coffee break room. I'm not going to have a conversation with you about race at this time. A personal conversation is, hey, I'd love to meet you for coffee, maybe tomorrow morning or sometime this week. There's something I want to talk to you about. A personal conversation is, I was offended last week when you made a comment about you people, and I felt as though you were talking about me or talking about my culture. And so the difference between those things is you can see one of them is in a time that is set aside, right? I know my bandwidth. I got up early. I got good rest last night. I drank coffee. I know what I want to say. I know that I care about this person enough to let them know how I feel. And I want to hear what they have to say about it. So I'm going to make time for that. But a personable conversation, that conversation is, hey, I know that regardless of what I say, you're stuck in your own thought process. This conversation really is not going to be had in the right setting because we're at work right now. And this is going to be one dimensional. So I'm not going to respond or engage in a way that's going to further a dialogue, particularly with someone that's not really interested, that just wants to debate back and forth your experices. So what those are the things that I recommend.
So what do you do with people? And you really, know your stuff, right? I can tell. What do you do with individuals who you have assessed that you just can't have a civil conversation with them about equity? That we're equal, that there shouldn't be any barriers or, you feeling superior because of the pigmentation of your skin over me. Because first of all, their minds is not renewed. They really do believe that they're better than you. They do believe that, yeah, you know, one race is a lesser class than the other. No matter the headspace that you get, that's a person you can't dialogue with. So how do you deal with individuals like that?
So there are two ways that you can deal with people like that. And these are two ways that I recommend. Obviously, as a consultant, I'm giving you advice, but you may have another way that works for you, and that's fine. But the two ways that I recommend is, number one, you can learn to respect others in conversation. I think that we have this itch to just make people agree with us. Like, oh, if I say it 5 different ways, then maybe you'll agree with me. And we need to be willing to respect that people can't have and are entitled to their own opinions, as long as those things are not impeding your pursuit at life. As long as those people aren't in a position like, you know, an elected official or something, those people should be held accountable. But just your colleague or someone that has a different opinion than you, you can respect that they have a different opinion and still respect that person, even if you disagree with their lifestyle, even if you disagree with the way that they've summed up an experience that they've had, even if you disagree with their political preferences.
Right.
We are not individually, we are not the catalyst for humankind. God didn't say, okay, well, Jennifer is how I'm going to make everybody, right? So we need to learn that people are entitled to their own opinion. So that's the first thing, is respect that someone has another viewpoint. And this can go either way, because I've seen it opposite in terms of faith-based organizations, where you have people that are on the opposite end of special groups that want to talk about everything but faith. And so then faith becomes a special group. So again, we have to be able to respect each other's differences. And the second thing is super simple. Move on. Just move on, right? Why are we expending emotional energy, time? You're thinking of this whole elaborate plan. When you get to work tomorrow, all of these 1, 2, 3 points that you're going to give this person, and you're going to tell them. And at the end of the day, they're going to say that they still don't care, and they're going to move on.
Right.
So you don't want to be in that position. You don't want to be in that predicament. So the best thing that you can do at that point is just say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on.
Wow. Man, you are helping a lot of people here, because this goes for not just racism. It actually goes for friendship, marriage. It goes for business partners, that when you're dealing with people in general, that they will have their own difference in the way they think, their own opinions about certain things, and they may be wrong, because they may be wrong, but you have to learn to just accept people for who they are, and don't allow it to get you so angry where you feel like you're kind of like God. If they don't accept yours, they may be wrong, or you get angry and you begin to argue with them. And you said it, that's the $1 million approach. Just move on.
Just move on.
You know, you're in a relationship and the person doesn't value who you are, you know, and you're doing everything to show the person your worth. And they hold on to the fact that you are less, you are this, you're that. Move on. Accept that they are who they are and you can't change them.
Absolutely.
Same with your children. Grandmother's watching right now. You've done everything for your grandson, your granddaughter, your daughter, your son, and they've made their choices, because it's all about choices, right, Jennifer? It's about choices. It's the choices you make. You make your own choices. Others make their own choices. You got to accept people, even though their choices may be wrong. Accept the fact that they did it. But hey, I don't believe in that. I don't agree with that. I'm going to move on, and I'm not going to carry it out for years upon years with bitterness and hostility. Yes.
Absolutely. I think that is key. And I'll add to that you may be the person that's wrong, and you may that sometime in the distant future, right? And your approach may be wrong. Maybe, again, you didn't evaluate your bandwidth before you started to engage in any level of whatever, as you talked about. It could be relational, it could be
Mhm.
a parent-child perspective, but knowing your bandwidth keeps you from getting in that heated, emotional, chaotic conversation that leads to a whole lot of empty words and hopefully apologies later, regret or grudges. And
Mhm.
so it's very important that before we start having a tough conversation of any kind, whether it's equity or inclusion or not, that we're evaluating whether we're in the right headspace to do so.
So how do you deal with them? Because I mean, you're just speaking truth, and you're full of knowledge in this area. If I have time, I'll go back and ask, what will the new Jennifer tell the old Jennifer? No, no,
To
now.
move on a lot.
Hopefully, you can deal with that. But I want to ask this because I feel people can relate to this. So oftentimes we find ourselves, at a place where we hold on to our own ideas, our own thoughts. Now, there are times, like you said, we could be wrong. We could be the ones, our perceptions are off and so forth. But based on your profession, plus, by the way, you're a minister, you and your husband, your pastors and so forth. Let's deal with the religious arena now. Okay. I find I've been in ministry all my life, my church all my life, I should say, ministry, pastor in this church for over 30 years now. And what I find that sometimes believers can be the most difficult individuals, not all, but I find a lot of them very difficult to retrain their thinking, if you understand what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely.
Do you find that even with what you're doing professionally, but I'm quite sure you counsel people, you deal with people in ministry. Do you find that it's a hard environment because they're stuck in their ways, whether it is about tradition, belief systems that they have that, by the way, Jennifer, it's not even biblical.
Yep, absolutely.
How do you respond to that? How do you deal with situations like that?
I first of all had no intention of being in ministry at all. When I married my husband, he was not a pastor.
All of us.
And so God still got me anyway. But yeah, we definitely lead other people, and we help with, life groups, and we try to make ourselves as available and transparent as possible for people. But, in ministry, people can draw energy from you and drain you dry with, as you said, that level of ignorance or stubbornness or unwillingness to allow the truth to change them. I think I'd say that. I think that for me, and I can only speak for myself, what has worked. Actually, I probably speak for my husband too, because he's one of the most patient people that I've ever met in my life. We've just learned as leaders in ministry to use a lot of grace, a whole lot of grace. And when you've given as much grace as you can give, a little bit more grace on top of that grace. And that has helped us to stay out of the mind frame of judging people, of summing them up, of being tired of them, and helped us to continue to give where we could and move on in areas that we were unable to sufficiently support. I think we always lead with love, and we try the route of truth and understanding. But when people are just closed off and they're unwilling, you just have to love them where they are and move forward to somebody that may be more ready to receive whatever message that it is that you're giving, or whatever growth. Because if you're focusing on this hard ground for all that time, I think that we get wrapped up into us needing to be, we need to change these people. We need to change their thought process. And that's not our job. That's God's job. Right. So I think leading people through ministry is a lot easier when you do what God asked you to do and let him do the rest. And so we allow that in our lives for God to lead us and to be obedient to him, but not to stay too long at a place that is not fertile ground.
Okay. That's good. What would the now Jennifer tell the old Jennifer?
So the now Jennifer would tell the old Jennifer that it's okay, that no one is really expecting her to do everything and have it figured out. The now Jennifer tells the now Jennifer that, you know, you don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to have it all together. There's real life happening for everybody every day. And I think the people that are very successful with social media, the influencers, those are the people that are allowing individuals to see their real life. And so we're all actually a part of this marketing scheme that we think we need to show this perfection and this togetherness. And I think that that's okay. We definitely want to demonstrate our levels of expertise, but I also think it's okay to be vulnerable and to say, you know what, I have no idea what I'm doing in this part of my life at all, you know, or sometimes I'm not confident and I'm not sure about that. And I lean on my friends and people I consider as sisters for support. I personally have taken that model of that youth pastor that spent so much time with me and have multiplied it by making sure that I'm always in contact with women that are at least 20 years older than I am to give me advice on what I need to be doing. And I think we wait around for them to come find us, but you need to go find them. Like if there's somebody that's in ministry already that's been doing this 20 years and you and your husband or you are just thinking about getting into it, find them, sit down, listen to what they have to say. There's somebody already in business. Before I started JSM Diversity, I talked to dozens of people who've owned their own businesses and got consultation from them on the do's and the don'ts and the things that they learned. I talked to my parents. So I think that I would have told an older version of myself to find more of that youth pastor, like more people that are willing to give you of themselves, not money, but time and wisdom and an investment of those things, because those are the things that keep me grounded. They keep me able to be a wife, be a mom, be a business owner, be a friend. Those are the people that support me when I need that support. I've multiplied it. And I think that's something I would have loved to know a lot sooner in life.
Wow. So once you have discovered what you're about, which you have, you know, at some point in time, you knew you wanted to start this company. At some point in time in your life, you said yes to God, even though you were running away. You know, you said, okay, I'll do it, God. You have to develop a passion for those things. You know, I remember, I've said it over and over. I share similar stories like you and your husband. I never thought I'd be a pastor. This was the last position in the world I wanted. I grew up in church. Church is not bad. I don't want people to think the church is bad. It's the church, the body of Christ. It's the greatest environment to be in. But I've seen a lot. And not only that, for me, it was, I think what has damaged, Jennifer, a lot of people, it is the misinformation about who our God is. It's the misinformation about the Bible. You know, because I have to oftentimes say, how in the world? Now, I know there are other Bibles out there, but just let's use the known as the King James Version. How is that one Bible birth so many different religions, so many different denominations? Somebody must have gotten it wrong, you know, and so forth. So I never wanted to be who I am today. But the moment I said yes to God, that was my purpose. And the passion that I developed grew stronger and stronger, and I went after it. So the next 5 minutes we want to spend on this is, I know for you, you know, you believed in, okay, my husband heard from God. We gonna pastor a church. We gonna go into ministry. Okay, all right, I'm gonna start this company. I'm gonna move from Tennessee to where you are now. All of that stuff. Encourage the listeners, the viewers on how to go after what God is, or where God is leading them, even though it doesn't make sense. Because you question God yourself. God, what are you doing to me? Mm-hmm. Where are you taking me and my husband? But you trusted him and you went after it. Help them, Jennifer.
I would say that you have to be all in. Like
all
God
in.
won't use you any other way.
Wow.
He won't use you any other way. You have to be all in. It is that step of faith. It is not being able to see what's on the other side of it, but trusting in the God that is leading you to the other side of whatever that passion is that you have. When you say yes, and a for real yes, like you get focused and completely all in and say, okay, come what may, God just explodes it. And you will find yourself doing things and saying things and building things and networking. And people will say, how did you? That's how you know you're in a sweet spot. How is it that you can do all this with your children, with your family? How is it that you can manage to run a business? How is it that you can still have energy? How is it that you can still have strength? And I used to try to answer that question. But the truth is, it's God's power. That's what he's doing. That's his spirit exploding inside of you and just driving you and using your yes and the passion that you have to multiply it, because our God is a multiplier. And that's what he does. He takes what you're willing to give, which is the yes that you're holding on to, and explodes that. And when he explodes it, he makes it more than what you could have ever dreamed or imagined that it would be. And everybody's testimony is different, but it's still the same. It always has that first part where you have got to be all in without any safety nets, without any plan Bs, without any alternative direction, just saying, yes, God, whatever it is that you want me to do, I feel this passion burning inside of me. I'm going to trade everything, sell everything, invest everything into this, not because I believe in me, but because I believe in you. And I believe that this is what you're giving me. And I think that when we put our yes in God's hands, he always multiplies it. It always becomes more.
So you have to give him a yes for anything to work and for you to be in that sweet spot. You're saying some stuff that is really making me happy. I can preach in some of the notes that you gave me. I'll send you an offering. You have to say yes. You have to, and then you use a phrase that really, I'll never forget that. You got to be all in.
Yep. You got to be all in.
Oh God, man! Because if you're not all in, then the process or the journey becomes frustrating.
Yep.
Because you're not giving it your all. Perhaps maybe there are other options, but I'm quite sure you and your husband had to get to a place where, look, there's no other option. Yep. We're not leaving anything. We're packing. It's not a vacation. On a vacation, you pack.
Yeah.
And you only take the essential things, because you're coming back. But when you're moving, what do? You can't leave anything.
No. Goes all with you. You gotta be all in. That's the only one.
Wow. Jennifer, this was lit. People would say, I really enjoyed the conversation. I wish you all the best with your company, with ministry, with your husband, your children. Thank you so much for sharing with my audience today on how to pursue their passions and giving them hope. Letting them know, looking at you, people don't know your story. They don't know your struggles. Sometimes they look at your successes and think that, okay, you just woke up one morning, I should say, and, there it was, you got it, but you've been through the journey. And I think that's why you are qualified to share your experiences with people, giving them hope. Again, I wish you all the best. And folks, thank you so much for tuning in. Please make sure that you send to me your comments. Let me know how this has blessed you today. Give a shout out to Jennifer, man. Tell her you did excellent, did a great job. I know her parents are happy when they listen to this, you know, and so forth. So Chief Clark, you need to send me an offering. Praise the Lord. Your daughter did well. Thank you so much, Jennifer. God bless you.
Well,
Bye-bye.
thank you. Bye-bye.